This is our last time together before you do the final exam. All right, here I've got the final exam. There, you get a quick look. Write down all those questions. You may need them. What I'm going to try to do here is make sure that I say in a pretty clear manner what I'm expecting you to know. Now, the reason I do that, if you and I are in class together, our interaction together makes me aware that you've caught it, that you've picked up on it, or that I need to explain it a little bit better, or be a little bit more clear, or perhaps more blunt in how I say something. Uh, I can't do that in the video format because I don't get those direct, immediate interactions with you. And I think that's why in some cases I found that my final exams are quite challenging for the students. So what I want to do here is go over what I have in this exam and make sure that I've put it out in a clear enough manner that you'll have no trouble doing it. So I'll try to get through it as quick as possible so that we can make it in the time that we have and that you'll have a good review. I hope I made it clear that I think the primary purpose, or the only purpose for the church to exist, is to evangelize the world, to preach the good news to every creature before God comes again. We're not primarily there to strengthen the Christians. We strengthen Christians so they can go out and preach the gospel or be part of that. If that's the case, then every member of the church should be an integral part of the missions outreach of that church in some way or another. If they're not actually going, they should be giving sacrificially. They should be working to help make that happen and to be an active part of it. So I don't see missions as a little add-on program we do here. I see it as the focus of the church, reaching the whole world with the good news of Jesus Christ. With that in mind, my definition of a missionary, you can have your own, that's okay. You're permitted. But for this exam, you need to know my definition of a missionary. And that's someone who goes across linguistic, cultural, and generally national boundaries as well. Not always, but in most cases. And they go to preach the gospel, sent out by the local church and in partnership with them. So in that scenario, those that don't go are still an integral part of that team by being part of this support network. What is it in the military? I think they say they got something like 23 support personnel for every frontline troop they have out there actually fighting the war. That's probably about the same ratio, or maybe even a little bit more than what we'd have in the church. If missions is the most important aspect of the church, it's its purpose and reason to exist, missions should be more than just a little add-on under the budget or a bulletin board out in the lobby or somewhere. It should be the focus. It should be what we're geared to. And what all of our local work does is integrate the church into this worldwide outreach program. I think I threw out the term Heilgeschichte, that salvation history, when I talked about the proto-Evangelium there in the book of Genesis. If I didn't, you get it now. Heilgeschichte. Heil Hitler, you heard that from all the old World War II movies. Heil means to save. God save the king or queen or whatever in that case. Heilgeschichte is the salvation history. Now, it's just not a term that arrogant theologians use. It describes the nature of the church and of what we're supposed to be doing. It's this unifying thread that holds every story in the Bible together like the string that goes through the pearls. You don't really see the string, you see the pearls, but that thread's what keeps them together. And that's what this salvation history, or Heilgeschichte, is. Now, the purpose of God for choosing Israel wasn't to save Israel. It was that Israel could then be a message or a messenger for all the world. And that's what God says to Abraham. I'm going to bless you so you can be a blessing to every family on the face of this earth. And if Abraham says, I'm not going to be a blessing, then he's no longer that chosen vessel because he chose to set himself aside. Now, he didn't do that, but Israel did and has done that today. The focus of God in this proto-evangelium, what he gave to Abraham, what he reconfirmed with Noah, what he gave them to Moses, all of this working up to the coming of Jesus Christ wasn't because the people of Israel were special. It was because he simply chose them to do it. It wasn't for salvation. It was to do a job. And people today say, oh, Israel's God's chosen people. They're not going to be left behind. They've never read their Bible. Because in the Bible, God left them be conquered by the Babylonians. They were rejected time and time again because they rejected God and what God had called them to do. And so they're not saved because they're God's chosen people. They were God's chosen people to take God's message to the whole world. That's what you and I are today. As he rejected Israel when they refused to do it, he'll reject you and I if we refuse to do it as well. Now, the gospel, the Evangelium in the Bible, that's the good news that Jesus came. He died for our sins. He gave us the ability to be adopted into the family of God and cry out, Abba, Daddy, to the God, the Lord of the universe, because of the work that he has done in us. It's the good news of Jesus Christ. And the Gospels, the Great Commission, they've been presented as a clear command for all people of all times, the Great Commission in the New Testament. That's why it's there 5 different times. The reason for repetition is because he felt it was so important. We're told to preach the gospel, starting in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, even to the ends of the earth. Yeah, we should work in our hometown, but we should work in the neighboring state, and we should work in the next door country, and we should make sure the gospel is going all around the world. If we focus only on one area, then we have failed. Now, the book of Revelation is interesting because it talks about this as sort of a play, an acting out. And a person that goes there and says, oh, this color horse and that color horse and this great prostitute and Babylon and all that, you're missing the story. It's a story of a persecuted church that perseveres, and that God is with that church clear through until the end. So our understanding of the nature of the missionary work, it's to motivate us to go out and preach the good news into all the world until he comes. We'll be better at whatever we're doing, but we should all be part of that missionary effort, and in that sense, a missionary. Now, why do the churches not teach about missions very often? I think the big reason is we haven't really taught it in our Bible colleges and our theological training like we should. Our shortcoming, our bad, so to speak. And I'm working to try to improve that here, and that's part of the reason for this class. I wish I could make it so everybody had to take this class, but of course that's not the case. I'm glad that you are taking it. Now, missionaries don't speak about organization and structure a whole lot because they're afraid they're going to endanger their support. They don't want to rock the boat. But really, we missionaries should be teaching as well as simply out raising support. Now, why God select Abraham? Same reason he selected Israel. I made a big point. Not because he was some great, perfect guy. He simply was somebody willing to follow the Lord's leading. And he had all sorts of shortcomings and problems, but he went somewhere else because when he went somewhere else, he could then see his own problems by seeing the same problems in somebody else. Fundraising for the missionary, well, Paul did it. That's what he did. He writes to the Roman church and says, hey, I want to come visit you guys so you guys can help me to go to the regions beyond, go over on to Spain there, which is what he wanted to do. Missionaries have raised support ever since the Apostle Paul and from that day forward. It's part of the nature of the game. Nothing wrong with it. Tent making mission, yeah, Paul did that for a little while he was waiting on the money bags guy to come down from northern Greece there. But he didn't do it very much or very long. He wasn't a tent maker missionary. He did that when he had a shortfall for a particular period of time. And a lot of missionaries I've known have had to do that over the years as well. Something I didn't mention in this class that I should have, I meant to, I've got it in the final exam. I don't want to take it out because I think it's important, so I'll leave it here. When we talk about the imprecatory psalms, you know what those are? That's where the psalmist rails against Babylon usually, or, the wicked, and says, send them all to hell, and smash their babies against the rocks and all that. Is that God's will that we go and smash babies against the rock? No. What are the imprecatory psalms then? It's somebody speaking from the heart, and you can speak from your heart to God. You can say anything, and he'll listen, and he'll care. And so not everything in the Bible is a direct order for you. When it says, and Judas went out and hung himself, that's obviously not an order that we're supposed to follow. It's an example of what happened. And the imprecatory psalms are that. They're sometimes used to say we shouldn't be out preaching the gospel because, look, these evil people deserve to be destroyed. No, that's not the point of the imprecatory psalms, and we should understand that. That need to put in my notes to make sure I'm a little bit more careful to include it because I think it is important. The theology of missions in the Bible makes it very clear that we're to be out sharing the good news with others. It wasn't just for us. We're not some special people that deserve it, and they don't. So it was given to us in trust that we share it with everyone else. When Jesus built his church, he didn't tell us to go out and build big fancy buildings. He didn't tell us to go out and start really neat programs. He told us to go out and evangelize the world, to win it to Christ. And if we're going to build a big fancy building, that's okay, as long as its purpose is to nourish and strengthen the local church so it can go out and preach the gospel. The end result should always be the preaching of the gospel. And if we're not doing that, we're failing to be the Lord's church. Now, when Jesus spoke about giving this glass of cold water and feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, I've tried to make a big point. That's personal. That's you. That's what you're supposed to do. As a church, we're to be out preaching the gospel. So it's not so much the corporate responsibility. It can become that when there's a disaster. Then we as a church can do what we as an individual cannot. But it's basically presented on the local level. And the primary responsibility of the church is to be out preaching the gospel. So we help the poor on a corporate basis as part and parcel of our evangelistic outreach, not in place of it. And a church that's doing social work and not doing evangelistic work as their primary effort has failed to heed the call of the Lord Jesus Christ. Did you watch the movie Gospel Blimp? That was a homework assignment. You better, because there's going to be a couple test questions on it here, at least, 2 or 3 here. So if you didn't watch the Gospel Blimp, boy, you're in big trouble. Watch the Gospel Blimp, because I talk about it and what happens to human organizations that are founded and all that, because that's what happens in the Gospel Blimp. Starts out good. It ends up bad because it's human. And what happens in the end? That guy that's a neighbor and kind of drops out when he sees the way things are going, he goes out and does the evangelization that originally the Gospel Blimp organization had been started to do. And every human organization will go bad. It's just a question of how long it's going to take them. Now, the missionary organizations often can do a good job, but they often have the effect of separating the missionary work from the church. And as a result, there's not that sense of ownership, of responsibility, of partnership. And that's where I think that we lose out. I've got several questions here on missionary organizations, so I hope you paid attention there. About what they do. If you didn't, go back and review that video again, because I think I've covered all of this stuff in here. I talk about medical work, stuff like that, feeding the hungry, dependency, when we create it, how we create it. That's a big section of this test, actually. And I think I covered it pretty well reading these questions. I hope you paid attention during those classes. If not, go back and review those particular lessons, because you'll want to. I think there's something like 20% of the questions deal with that. Now, the best missionary methodology is not cleared out in the Bible. It's you and I going out and simply preaching the gospel and adapting with our knowledge, with the brain that God's given us, the way to do the message most effectively that we can present it and have people accept it. The Bible offers an example of the structure of how original missionaries worked. The churches supported Paul, sent him out, then Paul went back and responded and reported to those churches. That's the way it was done. Now, I think that pretty well covers what's in this test. It's 50 questions. They're multiple choice, multiple guesses you guys probably do. I think it's pretty clear. This dependency issue, as I say, in your textbook that you read, in the class, I covered it pretty well. Dependency is debilitating. It destroys the evangelistic outreach of the church. It perverts what we are there to do. It sucks funds and energies out of the evangelistic effort. And yet we do it because sometimes it's a whole lot easier to do. We do it because we see poverty and it hurts. We want to do something about it. And it's easier to run out real quick and take care of the problem today and not realize that we've simply kicked the can down the road and they're going to have that same problem tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And that we have to solve the heart issue. And in solving the heart issue, we will solve the rest of the issues as well. I talked a little bit about bribery and tips and all that kind of stuff, what it is. You're going to have a question on that here in the test. So look at all those things. I think the test is pretty good, other than that Hayal-Gashikti one, I think, and maybe one or two others. I think I covered them pretty well in the teaching. What I did was I covered them as I'm teaching. I don't say, here, this is. And as I say, have I had you in a class, I watch you guys, and I pay attention to your interaction. And if I look like I'm losing you or not making the point or you're not understanding, I clarify it. I build on it. I ask enough probing questions. I make sure you're understanding me. And I can't do that in a video class. So that's the reason I decided to go ahead and give you this review here. And I'll try to do one for the midterm exam too and put it up. That'll just be an extra video that I can talk to Brother John up there in the Sakai office and see if he can throw it in and put it as maybe an addendum or something like that. The midterm isn't usually as bad because I'm dealing with a smaller amount of information, all that kind of stuff. But I do think it's probably a good idea if I cover it, or at least make an effort to try to do that. Okay, I've enjoyed having you guys in the class through this medium. I do wish that I could have you personally. I just really enjoy being in a classroom, going back and forth, joking around a little bit, discussing issues, getting in a good argument once in a while. I have no objection when a student wants to challenge me on something. I appreciate it. Sometimes I've been corrected. I'm not perfect. I'm not omniscient. Only God is perfect, and only God is omniscient. And so if I say something's not right, I appreciate when a student comes back. Now, you can challenge me through the messages. That's okay, too. But kind of late to tell you that. I guess I told you that earlier, though, so you did get it. But I do like the classroom. If I'm on campus and you guys are available, look and see if I have a class. Take it. I'll do my very best to make it worthwhile and enjoyable for you. And I try to do my best to make it so you can get a good grade, too. I know these are optional classes. I know they're not required. And I know you guys have a lot of pressure on your time and energy, so I do make every effort to help you so that you can do, as good as possible. I know you're all working to keep your GPA up and things like that. Okay, with that, I'll end this session. I'll just say thanks for taking the class. I've appreciated having you. I've enjoyed having you. And I hope I can have you someday in one of my classes so I can actually get to know you and put a name with a face with a name and all that kind of stuff to get to know your personality. Man, I have students that I still message and talk to and follow on Facebook and everything from 20 years ago. It wasn't Facebook 20 years ago, but somewhere over the line they found me or I found them and we got hooked up. And we do because I care about you guys. I care about my students. And I don't make it a class and then I'm out the door and that's the end of it. You're my friends and you're my co-workers in Christ. You're the generation that's going to replace me because it's not going to be that long till I'm stepping off this world stage. And I hope I can share some of what I've learned through my mistakes, through my errors, through my studies with you guys, and that maybe you can benefit and not have to make all the mistakes I did. And I make some of them because I'm good at it, but hopefully I can help you that way. So thanks. God bless, and I hope you all do well in the class. Have a good day.